Well, I'm delighted now to welcome to the studio Martin McBride from Envision, who will now present his top tips for tendering presentation. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Sarah. So as Sarah introduced, we want to talk a little bit about some tips on tendering. Now, I should say it's a huge subject to cover in a short space of time. It's pretty enormous. In Go to Tender programme that's run by InterTradeIreland, we do a much deeper dive into the whole process of public sector tendering through workshops and support mentoring. But today we'll look at it in overview and really focus in on some highlights and some tips on tendering itself, on the public sector market, on how the process works, but also then on how we engage with that process and how we engage with that market, and look at content. So process and content working together to try and improve your bid outcomes. It is a maze. It can be characterised by some frustration. It's a huge opportunity though, so we have to balance that degree of frustration with the opportunity that there is there to access. So what are those top tips? There are initially 12 tips that I think we'd like to take on board in terms of the overall process, and then we'll look at content in a little more depth. But just to start, we need to take a selective approach to bidding for public contracts and focus carefully on the types of work that you perhaps have strengths in, that you want to carry out, and also to some extent the kinds of work that you perhaps don't want to do and haven't got the skill sets or the capacity or capability and are really an outside chance of winning. So where do you have that chance of winning and that opportunity to win? Because overall we want to bid less and win more, ideally. And taking that selective mindset then, do your research. It's important that we don't just focus on bidding all the time. We can, on occasions, get a little bit lazy in public sector bidding. Why? Because we have alerts. Those alerts activate us, alert us to the fact that there's a live opportunity. But have we got any research in advance that tells us what's coming down the track in terms of pipeline? Engaging with contracting authorities, engaging with Northern Ireland Water, looking at future pipeline in order to enable us to prepare about what's going on. It's a large and diverse market. We should be doing our research in order to, I suppose, think through what areas we want to do work in, where we have strengths, why we should chase particular kinds of work, and understand really well how public sector works. Criteria, weightings, what people like to see in terms of bid content, because there's an awful lot of preparation we can do well in advance of bid events actually happening. Thirdly, all of that work, do we try to build a team? Yeah, I think it's important. Some companies are larger, will have a bid team. Harnessing those resources is important, but it's not always about the bid team. It may be about, in an SME or a small business micro situation, just harnessing the resources that we have. Perhaps unburdening yourself if you're an owner-manager, drawing in complementary skills from a peer group, colleagues, other companies that you work with, get them to peer review your work, you peer review theirs, because it creates an objective third-party view of the quality of your bid content. It also sometimes gives you a deadline in advance of the actual bid deadline to get a colleague or a peer to review your work, and it forces you to have the work prepared a couple of days in advance. Drawing in the resources of your team, and my experience, I guess, is tendering can be lumbered on people. It can be short straw, and that shouldn't be the case. People don't enjoy it. It's not a lot of crack, but it's a critically important task in any company to generate future stream of work. So who should do it? And we need to make sure that we don't, I guess, lumber it onto people as drawing a short straw experience. Actually, maximise the talents within the team that can contribute to the tender process and work that carefully. Some companies see it as a sales-led process, marketing involvement. Other situations it's pricing-led, perhaps by a QS or by an accountant. Actually, it involves all of those. So do try and work with a team. And in fact, if you're short of resource, this programme, the Go to Tender programme run by InterTradeIreland, is a perfect opportunity to draw in additional skills and to widen some of the burden and share that burden outside. So get that external help if you can to support the team. As I say, InterTradeIreland, but even the best tendering companies are continually trying to improve the standard of their work. by drawing in external help, by benchmarking against the best companies, improving standards. And that's critically important that we keep striving. Even if we're quite good at this, your competitors will look at your winning standard and try to better that the next time. So the winning bid you prepared last time may not win next time, because everybody's striving to continually improve, and we need to set that standard for ourselves too. So also do work hard at being able to describe the why. Bid processes can focus a lot on, tell me what you do, tell me how you're going to do it, method statements, process documents, case studies, how did that work? Maybe we should focus also on the why. Are we weaving enough of that into the way we communicate? And we'll look particularly at the way we address the content issues with that shortly. But it's important that we focus not just on the what we provide, but the why we should be the party to provide it for Northern Ireland Water and other contractors or contracting authorities. So why us? Make sure that features in your case studies and in your narrative. Don't give up after one stumble. A lot of companies fail. You know, the average would be that one company wins and 5 or 6 lose. So by the law of averages, you're going to lose more often than you win. But don't give up at that stage. In collaboration, I often challenge people to think about what happens if you lose. Are we in this for 3 bids to make sure that we get through that first stumble if there is one? But we've got to learn from it, get back up, be resilient, and keep focusing on the targets that we set in the public sector market in Northern Ireland Water in order to learn from our experiences and continue to improve. And to facilitate that, we've got to listen and learn and set aside the frustration that we may feel if we do lose, and listen to buyers, listen to the feedback. And sometimes, in fact, I find that the immediate frustration arising from a bid loss, in fact, there's more frustration with ourselves because we know we could have done better. And if we could, find out where, get that feedback. And you know, don't seek feedback as a challenge. Seek feedback to learn and treat it as the beginning of the sales process for the next bid opportunity. So build the library. Take the feedback and build that into your content, improve your library content, and don't wait for tenders to go live. Start working on that content now. Look at past bids, look at the requirements, look at starting to build the content that you know is going to be needed for next time. And linked to that, you know, patience, be focused, be strategic about your choices. Don't go for every tender and you know, rush at the marketplace. It's important that we focus on sectors and subsectors. It's a large, diverse organisation. Where are we best placed to win? And it's better to almost bid less frequently and put extra effort in to the ones we feel we can perhaps stand a better chance of delivering. It's not a task for admin, as I said. It really isn't. It's not a task for finance. It's not a task for individual functional areas. The good bids that I've worked with in the past really are a team effort, coordinating those teams. And that, of course, means someone has to harness those resources, manage that. And the management of resources, the management of the project management team in delivering the tender project is critically important to bring people in, not at the last minute, not as a show of bravado as the deadline approaches, rushing in to work late and early, actually in a measured way to make sure that we really bring the resources that we have. And that's why I said a moment ago, sometimes our frustration is not with the buyer. Maybe the frustration should be within ourselves in that we kind of know we could have done a better job. So it's important to do that. And in terms of that resource, don't write off, don't be too cautious about the possibilities of working with other companies. Collaboration can bring huge benefits. Joining forces with others, provided, of course, we give time to have that conversation properly, it can help us target larger bids. It can help us, in fact, reduce risk. And we shouldn't just consider collaborating when we're forced to, when we have to. And that, of course, could be because we don't meet thresholds. So we need to collaborate. But there may be occasions where actually we can meet thresholds, but collaboration might still just be a good idea. So we can technically bid for contracts up to 50% of our turnover, but should we? Or would it be better to collaborate, win that contract, and instead of us carrying the risk of a contract that's 50% of our turnover and creates a cliff edge when it comes to an end, maybe we should in fact bid collaboratively, and we have a contract that's 20 to 25% of our turnover and represents less of a contract and business risk to our company. So it's not easy, for sure. Don't expect it to come necessarily easy, It takes a lot of research, resilience, acceptance of failure, dusting down, getting back up and going again. But it is actually worth it. And the frustration of the process is usually set aside when we get to the point of winning a bid and creating a degree of security with long-term contracts, if those are available to us. So getting closer to that, the market, to the experience of bidding, how do we help ourselves or get ourselves to stand out from the crowd and avoid mid-range mediocrity? One of the things that's apparent to contracting authorities is the margins between winning and losing tenders can be quite small. Very fine margins. It can be a few points. I worked with a company not that long ago who lost a £7 million contract for the sake of a couple of marks. And that was pretty harrowing, to be honest. And right away, they kind of knew where those marks could have been found. Back to that point earlier about frustration with ourselves, we knew we could have done a little bit better. So how do we stand out from the crowd? What lessons can we take to do that? And part of it, I think, is not just in the bid itself, but before the bid. And looking at our approach to tendering a little bit from a distance and then close up. And that initial from a distance piece sometimes is looking at digital marketing. What is our footprint like? And are people aware of who we are? Networking and getting out and being involved in events like this event, which is virtual this year, but in other years will be back to being perhaps face-to-face. And direct, which is the meeting a contracting authority, meeting a buyer, and then obviously the bid process itself. But it's important, a lot of buyers are very digitally aware. A lot of people in procurement are tracking companies in the sector. They're checking out our websites. They're aware of our digital content. And if we use tendering scoring parlance, would your digital profile, your website, your content on your company LinkedIn page, would it score a 5? Or would it score a 1 or a 2? Because that actually is not scored as part of a tender process, but I do believe it contributes to people's perception of your business. And then it helps clearly to write compelling content as well. And that creates a differentiator. You're a good company, good content, writing good content, great case studies on LinkedIn. That communicates the fact that your business may have real expertise in a particular area of water or wastewater processing, maybe meeting an industry standard, owning intellectual property, having real proprietary knowledge. That creates a strong expectation. And of course, if you back that with a great bid, that clearly is very, very important. So it contributes to the perception of value that we provide to customers and contracting authorities. And what can we do with that? Maybe we get the opportunity to create customer interest. Maybe we get the opportunity to engage with buyers and have discussions about criteria and weightings and scoring and how procurement functions. And that can happen as a result of us having a strong profile, developing a strong series of bids over a period of time. It certainly earns some competitive visibility. That's very possible. So it's important, establishing a little bit of that personal capital, value in your brand, value in the key people in your business through what they write, through what they contribute online, through those events, the events they speak at, and maybe the response to a request for information. An RFI, a request for information, if you get an opportunity to do that, and I've worked with people on those contributions, can then get us into dialogue. And those dialogue situations can focus in on criteria and weightings and help influence the procurement process. So what is your digital footprint? And that is important. And people sometimes challenge me and say, hang on, we're only scoring what's written down. That's not important in a tendering environment. I just don't believe that's true. I think it's all important to building the perceptions of our company and our brand. So critically important. Avoid that mid-range mediocrity, and we've got to try and stand out from the crowd. And look at these points. I had a discussion session one day with a particular contracting authority after a meeting and over a coffee, and we talked about what do you want from in a company. And all of these points came out, threw them up in a flip chart, thought, I used to call this my cake and eat it slide, laughing at people really do want their cake and eat it, but actually there's a lot of important stuff in here. Are we communicating these things in our bids? Are we getting them across? Or are we in fact treating tendering a little bit like filling a form in? And that's something that's happening a little too much with companies, because tender response documents are becoming more formulaic. It is a response document. It's standardized. It can look a little bit like a form. Does that then in turn lead us to drop the standard of the contribution we're making and treat it like responding to a form, filling a form in, answer the question in a minimalist way, instead of saying, actually, this is a sales process. It's a sales document to really communicate why my business should be the provider of this solution or service or delivering this contract. And that means we've got to think a little bit about whether we get across the fact that we have fantastic people, that we really do understand the customer's needs, that our track record combined with technical knowledge and the value for money and innovation that we deliver is compelling. And is that coming across, or are we filling a form in? And that, in my opinion, sometimes is a risk. We drop the level slightly. None of us really enjoy filling forms in, but tendering shouldn't be viewed as a form-filling exercise. It should be viewed as an exercise in selling our company and finding the extra 5 or 10% to move from that middle-range mediocrity to winning the tender. So there's 3 standards that I want to just sow, or seeds to sow in your mind as we think about this, because a few key tips, as Sarah said earlier, we've got to zone in on a couple of key points. And the standard that I want to try and get you to think a little bit about is when we write, do we look at achieving a high level and communicating a high level of technical competence? Clearly that's the starting point. But then, is it communicative? Scoring panel. Engaging with my document. Is it turgid? Is it difficult to understand? Is it technically loaded with jargon? Or actually can the scoring panel access the information they need in a way to allocate the scores that I want them to allocate to me easily because it's communicative and maybe even engaging? Do they learn something? Does it flow? Is it graphic? Is it visual? Are we getting across the key points so that we address the technical requirements of the bid? We communicate that technical expertise in a reader-friendly way so that technical scorers and non-technical scorers can access what they need to access to allocate those scores, and maybe even engages the reader, interweaving that narrative and the context and the case studies so they're drawn into it, not colliding with it as in it's tough to read, it's turgid, it's dense, it's impossible to really get into. And you've got to think a little bit about the scorer who may be reading document number 7 on page 65. And actually, that's tough going. A document that's well set out, that is really compelling, is going to help people give you the scores a lot more. And being visual and graphic helps that enormously. Just this morning, I was working with somebody on completing a bid up until shortly before here. And the final points we were adding were flowchart content, visual content to bring the narrative alive a little. And it's important, I think, to add that as much as we possibly can. So let's take those 3 things we talked about a moment ago. Technical competence, communication, and engagement. If we can achieve those and apply those across 4 areas of content, might we have to write an understanding of requirement? Yeah, we might well have to do that, which is good in my view because it gives you the opportunity to platform your expertise properly. Organization chart, team profiles, yeah. Can we do that in a minimalist way or in fact add real value to it? Case studies and examples of work, and then our method statements. And let's just break those down a little and look at the 4. They've really got to communicate why you, and add an extra gloss. Find the extra 5%, the extra 10% that might bring us to win. Because if we score well on quality, that might take a little pressure off the price, depending on the weightings, of course. And you know, one of the things when people say to me, we lost that on price, my response to that instinctively has to be, well, I'm presuming that you pretty well maxed out on quality. Because if you maxed out on quality and someone beat you on price, they really did beat you on price. But if you left the door ajar because you really didn't max out on quality, you made it relatively easy for them to push that price door open. And that's your fault. You lost on quality, they didn't win on price. Someone only beats you on price if you've maxed quality and still lost. So understanding of requirement. Great opportunity to demonstrate expertise. Minimalist approach to doing that is to take the brief you've been given and copy and paste it into the document, the response document, and do a little bit of an edit. And that happens a lot. Contracting authorities tell me that happens a lot, and that is dreadfully poor work because not good enough. It's not showing an understanding of requirement really It's showing an understanding of how to copy paste. And we need to do better than that. And my rule, I guess, is try to give none of their briefing content back. Now, of course, the challenge then is, but you've got to reflect their requirements. Of course you have. But not in full pages and paragraphs. Actually, what we've tried to do is reflect the need and the want that the contracting authority is expressing, and go beyond that. Demonstrate the real knowledge we have of the technology, of the challenges, of the energy pressures perhaps involved in tertiary water treatment, if we're using UV, and what the different technology options are, and the combined pressures of efficacy versus energy consumption. There are a whole lots of issues around our understanding of requirement, but it's not achieved. It's not getting fives with a cut and paste of the brief back to the client. We've got to demonstrate knowledge, not say we have knowledge, demonstrate knowledge of the sector. Where could that come from? Maybe some talented people that we've hired, maybe some very talented people we have on our board, maybe through a collaboration that we've worked on with a university department on R&D, perhaps being part of an industry working group on best practice in a particular problem and solving that problem. So those are all areas where that knowledge can be drawn into a business and then reflected back in our understanding of requirement, and use that understanding to set the parameters for methodology. Clearly, I want it to be in the understanding of requirement, but it also influences the way we shape and mould and plan the method statement. Draw on our experience, draw on our case studies, link them together, because our case studies probably also influence that understanding of context and gives us that accumulated learning. And then we start to draw strands of the bid together. So with a good platform, good understanding of requirement, we're starting to build an argument that we're good at this. So what about our team? And what can we communicate through the organisation chart and the team profiles? And I underline that. What could we communicate? And if I go back to an organisation chart I was sent a few days ago for a bid, dreadful. Black and white lines, little rectangles, names I could hardly read. Minimalist attempt at an organisation chart. In fact, it actually had lots of job titles and not even lots of names. So it depersonalises the org chart, and that's not good enough. That's not selling anything. What could we actually do? Maybe we could go further than that and say, let's put photographs in. Personalise this. We have a team of people. These people are going to deliver this contract. Let's put their images into the documentation. And surely we do have to identify their name and their job title and perhaps their role in the contract. Maybe there's also one little sentence of a claim to fame that we can caption under their photograph. They may be a member of an industry grouping. They may be on a standards body, a training council for the industry. They may, in fact, have got an exceptional qualification that not many have. Perhaps they delivered a large contract. And what that starts to do is to say, yes, we're being compliant, we're answering your question, but we're also selling your team, because every time you turn a page in this bid, I'd like you perhaps just to raise your eyebrows a little and be just borderline impressed by the quality of what we're giving you, the quality of the people and the quality of the presentation. So let's do a little bit more than the minimum. Focus on what people have delivered and achieved, not just what they do. Outcomes, successes, great qualifications, contributions to the sector and the industry, not just history. Outcomes and impact is important as well. And rewrite the organisation chart, rewrite their profiles, repitch it for every single bid. Why? Because it's great to have a bid library, and it's dreadful to use it in a lazy way, because copy-paste and lazy use of a library sometimes doesn't quite connect with the briefing in the RFT. So tailor it, speak to the need, pick out the relevant highlights of qualifications, and then we address the customer's requirement a lot more fully. And something I like to do is link the profiles to the case studies, which are coming in a moment. Case studies don't always ask about who did them. It just asks what happened. Tell me about this job. In fact, sometimes it's helpful to be able to say, yeah, we'll tell you about that job, but I'm also going to link it to the key people in our organisation chart. And then when we get to the case studies, there's another dimension. And case studies are critical. They talk about process. How did you do this? We want to see that you're able to carry out a project of a similar size and scale and complexity. Grand. But if we still have the key people working for us who did it, then I think we should feature them as well. And I also think we should talk about outcomes. Outcomes mean, what did we achieve? We did that job. Here's the process. But was the client happy? Were they really absolutely delighted with it? What's happened with it 5 years afterwards? Have we gone back to our clients and asked them retrospectively about the outcome we delivered, so that the process was exemplary, but it delivered a great result for our client as well? And can we actually write that down and get them to confirm it? Hopefully those case studies will inform the methodologies, so we start to build the fact that our method is going to be drawing on the case studies and, as I say, draw in the team. Case studies can be very flat, very passive, very dull. We need to make them come alive a little bit through the process and the outcomes and the people, and that creates a strong platform for this method. And the methodology, again, is a thing that is really focused on process, but I'm going to start not with process. I'm going to start with outcomes, because we expect to be asked to present the process. But if we go back a step here and look at the outcomes that we know we've delivered in case studies in the past, client validation of those outcomes, testimonials backing those outcomes, well, in this case, we want to deliver those outcomes again. And we want to link that back to the fact that we've got this covered, we've done it before, the client's validated that we've done it well before, and we understand the needs and the wants and the issues arising because the case studies confirm we are able to do this really well. So we're going to highlight that expertise, we're going to link to those case studies, we're going to draw in the team that we've presented and I hope impressed you with in that bid, and then we're going to talk about the process. So method can be delivered again in a very flat way. One other key point I would say with method is describing a process in words can be terribly difficult to absorb as a reader. Describing process in a flowchart, in a Gantt chart, and then weaving a narrative around that just allows a scorer to access points for you a lot more readily, especially if you imagine they're reading page 25 of bid number 7. Visuals absolutely that communicate way, way more effectively than words. So what do we want to get across? We want to get across the notion of a very strong method delivered by an expert team. Requires the delivery and the expertise of a strong, talented team, and we're going to try and get that across and communicate that. And that, I guess, means instead of writing this bid as a series of disconnected bits, an organisation chart and some case studies, and then a method statement, maybe we're trying to weave some cohesion between the sections of this document. And if we have time, because we complete our draft a couple of days ahead of deadline, we can sit back and read the components and weave a narrative through the discussion where the people delivering the case studies are delivering the method, and it starts to present a sales message around why you might be the party to deliver this particular contract. Maybe we create not just a form-filling response to a document or to a contract opportunity, but a compelling document, something that actually really starts to sell yourself throughout the process. Vitally important. Not just answering the question, selling through every page. And if you need advice, and if you think about what I'm just saying and saying, well, we need help to do that, well, that's fine, because there's an opportunity to access the Go to Tender programme, to avail of workshop training that unpicks all of what I've talked about just now and goes into greater detail on every component. And it's focused on the public procurement market, understanding the market, looking at tender process, looking at skills, looking at content development. And there's a link on the slides, which I'm sure are being made available. And that can take you in to look at that program and register for workshops, which are continuing periodically, every month roughly. And it's backed up by mentoring. You can have initially a little bit of mentoring to explore the market and think a little bit about how to access that. Set up on the portals. If you've got a bid, a little bit more time. And if you're looking for large bids, maybe getting involved in collaboration, cross-border, off the island, then there's a bigger package available. And you can progress through those phases, starting small and building into larger packages of support as bigger opportunities emerge. And the mentoring can be accessed on the link on that particular slide as well. So don't be feeling like you need help, but you're not accessing it. The help is there. It's free. It's very available. And InterTrade Ireland are very keen to attract you into doing the programme. So thank you for that. It's a very short period of time to get into a complex topic, but hopefully it creates a little bit of thinking, stimulates some thought, and maybe prompts you to go and access some help through the Go to Tender program. So thank you.